And Mr. Coulterman, we'll start with you if you'd like to introduce yourself and talk about your candidacy.
I always thought ladies first.
Yeah, well,
First of all, thank you to the York News Times and the Seward County Independent for putting this together. It's important to have discussions like this with the public because, as you all know, in the state of Nebraska, we only have a one-house unicameral. And as senators, the second house, we understand full well that the second house is the constituents, the people that are here tonight. I would tell you that when I ran for office the first time, 4 years ago, I really didn't have any kind of a specific agenda. I've always been interested in politics. I've always been interested in public service and tried to take leadership roles in the many organizations I've been involved with. I have a broad background. I'm going to tell you about my background primarily because there are people here that don't know me, and I think it's important for you to understand who I am and what makes me tick, if you can figure that out. I attended grade school in Seward, Nebraska at a parochial school called St. John Lutheran. I attended Seward High School, and then from there I went to UNL for 2 years. Then I dropped out of UNL when I got married, and I graduated from Southeast Community College in Lincoln with a degree in building construction. And then in 1994 I went back and got my bachelor's degree from Peru State. So I have a pretty diverse education background. I served on the school board. I was fortunate I got to serve with Stephanie together. We served for, she served for 2 full terms and I served for 7 years. Enjoyed that, and Stephanie and I have a lot of very similar views, and that went real well when we were on the school board together. I've been involved in church leadership, both at my church, St. John Lutheran, as well as St. Vincent's. My wife was a Catholic. We were married for 46 years, and so obviously I got to know her church quite well. So I was privileged to serve on the Board of Regents at Concordia University for 9 years, actively involved in Seward County economic development. I was a Boy Scout leader, and I was a volunteer fireman EMT for 14 years. So I have a pretty diverse background in that arena from a volunteer perspective. I started my business. I started in the insurance business in 1976. Then in 1980, I bought an insurance business here in Utica called the Utica Insurance Agency. And my wife and I ran that. We retired last year, and many of you were clients of mine, and I appreciate that. I was active in my association for many years, involved with legislative issues, probably one of the other reasons that I enjoyed politics. I was married for 46 years, and I have 2 daughters and 4 grandchildren. I enjoy spending time with them. And as I said earlier, I am a strong believer in education, and I've talked about that a little bit. Since I've been at the legislature, I've become a Build Fellow, and then I thought I'd talk a little bit about the philosophy of the unicameral. I think what's unique about the unicameral is, as senators, we don't always agree with positions, and I don't expect anybody here to totally agree with my position on every issue. But as a legislator, and throughout many of the tough bills that we've had, I think we respect each other's opinions and believe that same respect should follow with our constituents as well. The last 4 years I served on the Health and Human Services Committee. I think my background in insurance helped me there. My EMT services helped me there. 4 years on the Retirement Committee, 3 years as the chair of that committee. I was actively involved in Agricultural Committee for 2 years, and I was vice chair of that. General Affairs for 2 years, and Banking and Insurance for the last 2 years. So I've got a diverse background. I also serve on Committee on Committees. That's the committee that puts all the positions together, the different committees the last 2 years. I hope that you know by now that as I work through this, I treat it as a full-time job. I believe that a lot of diversity, my background gives me a lot of diversity, and I think it's important in the unicameral, and it helped me with my legislation. So again, I'd like to thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
And Ms. Nankus, thank you.
Well, my name is Stephanie Nankus. Is this working for everybody or not? Or okay, thank you. I'm married to Dan Nankus, who has retired from the Seward Sheriff's Office. And before that, he was in the Navy. And so from that marriage, we have 2 children. One is Danielle, who's a lawyer and the chief executive of the ACLU for the state of Nebraska. And the other is Ross. And he's an ag person. He's an agronomist for Frontier. So he goes all over this county, that county. They sent him to a lot of places. A little about my history. I was born in Pennsylvania. Excuse me if you hear some accent. The children tease me at school. I'm not able to get rid of it. And then because of my dad's naval career, we went to Guam. I was about 2 when we arrived there. When he was done with the service and a chemical engineer, we went to New Jersey. And so that's where I graduated high school. Yes, I have the New Jersey talk. I certainly do. For colleges, I have several degrees, undergraduate and several graduate degrees, all in education. I saved the best for last, math, because the world makes sense to me through math. I have taught special education, regular education, rural schools at B Public School where we had combined classes, K2. I was the K2 teacher. And then I went into Lincoln Public Schools. At Lincoln Public Schools, special education, gifted, the university. So I've had a lot of teaching experience. Seward School Board, Mark and I got to know each other a little bit better. He used to sometimes stand in between me and someone else when we didn't agree. But that was okay. Mark and I go back a long way. Our children grew up together, went to the same schools. We went to the same church, and we thought it particularly interesting and good for the community when our daughters were going off to their first national political convention that we had them with signs for the opposite parties to each on the courthouse lawn. I don't know, how long was that?
About 20 years ago.
20 years ago? All right. I must have been younger. And so we thought that it was really important for people to see that the parties can come together and that the parties can work together. From that, I will say, from the school board, we were on the government relations, where we used to go down on Wednesdays to the unicameral, and we became lobbyists down there where we did that. And so that was a very good situation for us. And Lincoln Public School was very good about giving me civic leave during that. On the union levels, I have been on the local, the state, and the national level for going to the things. Education is very important to me, and it will probably always stay important to me. Now it's much more important to me because we have 4 grandchildren, and I want to make sure that those grandchildren have the same education that our children had. We people are in the top 10 nationally for academics. I don't want that to slip. I want us to stay up there. How we fund it and all the other things, that's a time for discussion. And it isn't easy to do, but that's what drew me into this. And I was hearing the last 2 years at the unicameral vouchers, and I was hearing private schools and just different things, and it kind of got my goat up. So I decided to put my name in and run. I've done a lot of church committees, 4-H for 20 years, and just different things. Now we help a lot of elders. We call them the great-grandmas because they can't always get to where they need to be. So we find ways to get them to where they need to be. And some need help with medical insurance and how to do that. And so we kind of help with that with pharmacists and different things. 30, I want to be 30 again. Is that 30 seconds? Okay. The biggest thing that I enjoy in life, and we said this before, I fish left-handed, Mark, just to let you know that. We love to be by our grandchildren, and we get to do that as much as we can. So,
What do you feel is the single biggest concern facing the state of Nebraska at this time?
I think the biggest thing looming at all of us is our Nebraska taxes, how we take them in, who we take them from, and how we give them out. And that's just in my mind. Somebody else could, of course, think differently. But we take in $3.9 billion in taxes. We have a lot of different places that needs to go to in our state. The one that I, of course, think about is education. And if you choose to send your child to private school or parochial school, that money immediately comes out of the budget and just stays with the state. And then the state can choose how they want to spend that. So how we choose to, how this money comes down through the schools and how we in Seward get money is much different in the formula than how Lincoln gets money. And I think that TEEOSIA is how they get the funding. That formula maybe needs to be overhauled for us. On the state tax revenue, individual income tax is $2.2 million. Sales tax is $1.8 million. Petroleum taxes, so next time you're thinking, this gas is costing so much, that's $362 million a year that goes into the state. Corporate income tax and other sales taxes. So we have ways to bring it in. It might just be we need to slowly start to think how we can make some of those changes so that it's positive, so that nothing gets hurt in its way. And so, taxes for me.
We're pretty much in agreement on this particular issue. I personally believe the biggest single issue facing us is the property tax problem, especially as it pertains to agriculture. And we had 4 bills this past year that were locked up in committee, and very few of them got out. One of them actually came through the Education Committee. I was supportive of that bill, as well as I supported the governor's bill, and I like parts of Senator Breezy's bill. But in my opinion, as Stephanie has indicated, state aid to public schools isn't doled out in the right manner. The TEOSA formula, the formula that we use to pass out money to different school districts, is out of balance, tremendously out of balance. As an example, if you were in Omaha Public Schools, about 56% of their budget they get 56% of their budget from state aid. And when you look at that school district, the largest district in the state, and then you compare that to York or Seward or McCool or any of the other districts, Milford, we don't get near that kind of money. In fact, we get very little of the money. I don't think it's fair that one farmer that lives in the Centennial District might get charged $50 an acre for their property taxes. Right across the road, they're paying $100. That's not right. That's not equal. We've worked on several ideas on how we're going to fix that. I think one way, and it's getting some traction, is the idea of some sort of a foundation aid, so that every school district in the state would get an equal percentage of the number of students that they have there. So as an example, if you've got 400 students and you give each district $1,000, that's how much money they're going to have. If you've got 2,000, same way. So I think that's a fair way to start out, and then balance that out. That would immediately bring our property taxes down. The other thing is we get very little money in this area from state aid, and that concerns me. At the same time, we've also doled out a tremendous amount of tax exemptions, which we probably need to take a look at on the revenue side, because to grow our state, you can't, I don't know if you can just do it by cutting taxes. It's going to be very difficult. Now, do we have a governor that would support any kind of a tax increase? I don't believe he will. But I've been on the other side of governor veto overrides, and perhaps that's something that will have to be talked about. I think the body will tell you, as we left, there is a very serious concern. We all know that we need to do something about property taxes. So I think that'll be the number one issue as we come back next year. Thank you.
And this, it pertains basically also to what the two of you were just talking about. A special session is not being held to address the state's property tax issue, as only 14 senators signed on for such a session. Do you think that a special session should have been held rather than holding off the matter until next year?
Thank you. That's a very interesting question. Well, what I would tell you is, I'm not sure we won't have a special session. I think that possibility still exists. The problem that we have with what was proposed is there was no bill. So the very first thing that happens when you go into a special session, you have a bill that's introduced by someone. Well, we had 4 different bills, and it can't be that broad. Because when you go into a special session, you have one issue to talk about, and you have to address that one issue. Now, the idea that property taxes need to be addressed that's very accurate. And I know we have some senators, and I'm including myself in this, that are meeting throughout this summer, and we're going to go back. If there's a potential need for a special session, we're going to present a bill. We're going to give it some time to people to look at it, and then we're going to invite the senators to talk about a special session later in the year. The other thing, having just come off the session, we would have gone right back. We'd probably be there right now if that special session would have happened. And the speaker got up and suggested we not support that, simply because we had just gone through a pretty tough session based on what we had to do. We had to figure out how we were going to cut another $200 million out of the current budget. We'd already cut $1.2 billion from the previous year, and if you think cutting $1.4 billion out of an $8 billion budget is an easy task, it's not. And everybody has to take a look at that and see what their priorities are and see what's going to get hit. Are we going to affect the people that are getting reimbursed from the state for Medicaid? Are we going to cut that? Are we going to cut education? Fortunately, through the 4 years that I've been there, we have not cut anything in education. Having said that, I guess I would say that's why we didn't have a special session. And if there was traction for that, I believe that it would have happened with only 14 senators signing on. That's a long ways from the number that we needed. So now the governor can call a special session as well. I don't think he'll do that. The other thing that people don't realize is every day that we're there, when we're in session, it's $10,000 a day. So it's not cheap to have a special session. It can take some time, and I don't think the body wanted to spend money we didn't have.
Good information, Mark. One thing to piggyback on is the $10,000 a day for a special session, which none of that money goes to the senators. That's just running so the building can be there and everything else that goes with it. So it isn't that, oh yeah, let's have a special session so we can get more than our $1,000 a month. That's not it at all. I would also agree that a special session without a primary bill is probably not a good way to go. And we have a scale that's not quite even right now with that property tax and education. So if we figure out how to do education, will that help with the property tax? Or if we figure out the property tax, will that help with the education part? That cutting that $1.4 million, also, I don't know if everybody's aware that the budget is a 2-year budget. So you have a long-term and a short-term where senators are there. So they're trying to have this way out. We did make cuts to education this year, and it's to UNL and all the levels of our university. And if I'm wrong, I thought it was $34 million that did get cut. And I have been hearing from students, whether it's good or bad, that students stay in touch with you that are at UNK or UNL or UNO, and some of the programs that they're in are no longer going to be viable. So I understand that we have to look someplace for the cuts. It's just, I'm not so sure that they should be at education. And when you think about it, to you and I, $34 million sounds like a lot of money. I think we can agree on that. But in the $1.4 billion that needs to be cut, that truly isn't.
In York and Seward counties, as well as other counties along the interstate, the number of seizures of illegal drugs during traffic stops has been increasing. Many times, the seizures and arrests were the work of county sheriff departments, and all the people arrested are housed in county jails. Do you feel the state should provide funds to counties to assist in the ongoing battle against illegal drugs?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank everybody in law enforcement, my husband included on that. If we look at the 3 counties that are involved, we have Polk County that has their sheriff's office, and then they work with the state troopers. And they're out of C, as is York, has State Patrol, which is out of C, sheriff's office, and a police office. Seward County has the same, but they're out of headquarters, out of Lincoln for the state troopers, the sheriff's office, a Seward Police Department, and a Milford Police Department. Now, for for Seward County and for York County, they both have the interstate as part of their property, whereas Polk does not. And so, one of the best things that any of them ever did was bring in the dogs. I know that sounds a little funny there, but the dogs helped them tremendously with finding things that shouldn't be in the cars and shouldn't be transported. One of the big things that my husband used to talk to me about were the amount of guns that were going across the interstate back in his day when he was doing it. But we have the dogs. The dogs are helping us. And also it seems that the people who are moving the drugs seem to have cash with them, which is high amounts. The agency that does the bust, so to speak, then gets that cash. And they can share throughout. I know in Seward County, they use it to get new equipment. They use it to train. And I'm being told, I haven't heard from York, that it's pretty much the same that way. So the drug money that they are finding, they are able to use. They dispose of the drugs, thank goodness. And then this brings in another way. It's actually helping the taxpayer, because if they buy a new car, if they send somebody to classes, these are things they don't have to have come out of their budget. So it's good for us that we have the interstate, so that helps us with that.
Before I answer that question, I do want to make it clear, I was talking about K-12 education.
Okay.
And I do know we cut some money on the state, the University of Nebraska and the state colleges. I voted against that, but it happened. And fortunately, revenues came in and we didn't have to cut them as much as we thought we were going to have to. The drug issue on Interstate 80 and stopping people is an interesting challenge that we have as, first of all, the state legislature does not control the state patrol, the county sheriffs, or the police officers. That really all falls on the executive branch and the judicial branch in the counties. But I believe the spirit of cooperation is very strong between the counties that we represent, Seward, York, Polk counties, and even to the point where the State Patrol intervenes, as well as Lincoln. We do a lot of work with Lancaster County. When we noticed that a significant amount of drug traffic increased when Colorado had just medical marijuana, and then when it went to recreational marijuana, the people in the western part of the state that I talk to on a regular basis, some of my colleagues, will tell you that it's been very difficult to patrol that and keep that at hand. As I said, it is a pipeline for drugs, and we do have the dogs, and we've got a very capable group of people that are manning that. With the other thing, though, it's not just drugs that they find. We find that we've done a lot of work in recent years with it's a pipeline for human trafficking. And people don't think human trafficking exists in this state, but the reality is that's the #1 concern of Doug Peterson, our Attorney General. He wants to stop human trafficking. And so we've been able to reach across the aisle. Both sides of the aisle have come together, and you'd be surprised how much human trafficking goes right down Interstate 80, and the deputies are taught to look for that. And there's a lot of information that's passed on to our deputies, our State Patrol, and they work hand in hand. So many times they're going to know that somebody's coming this way. They might be coming up 81 from the Mexican area, or they may be coming from the west, from California, but they're coming this way because they're looking for jobs, and they're bringing people this way so they can take advantage of them. Money laundering, a lot of the times, as Stephanie indicated, the State Patrol finds a lot of money, our county finds a lot of money, and so we need to capitalize on that. Thank you.
Is there a true divide in the working relationships between urban and rural lawmakers in our state? And if so, what could be done to bridge that gap?
That's a good question. I believe there's a divide just based on geography. And it's no secret, each senator represents about a population of 37,000 people. So as people start moving to the east and move into Lancaster and Sarpy and Douglas County, you're going to see more population there. So you're going to see a bigger representation of population there. On the other hand, I believe if you come to the legislature and you come with the right ideas and open minds, you can overcome that divide. Because as an example, I'll give you an example. This past year, we had a bill that dealt with retirement monies. Omaha Public Schools has always had a better retirement plan than the state of Nebraska's. Well, we needed the help of the Lincoln people and the people from the other metropolitan areas to stop a bill that was going to go through the legislature. And we got this support. Now, you couldn't just do that with rural senators. Everybody understood that we shouldn't be bailing Omaha out. And so I think that one of my strengths has always been the idea that I can bring people together. I'm not afraid to reach across the aisle. We had the same type of an issue when it came to money lending in Omaha. There's a huge bill. Payday lending is a terrible problem. And we worked very hard to find some compromise with both rural senators and Omaha senators. And we were able to pass some legislation. I think it passed about 48-1. And so, and we really have very little of that in rural Nebraska. So it can be done. You just have to be able to reach across the aisle. You got to be able to talk to people. You have to be able to build consensus. The biggest challenge with that's probably in the property tax arena. That's where it's getting all the traction. We have to work on that. But there's a way. The people in Omaha are paying a lot of property taxes as well, as are our business owners. So property tax is an issue. We've got to resolve that. But we're not going to do it if we can't reach across the aisle and get some support from all aspects of the body.
I think we need to also mention, Mark, that y'all passed a bill this session that deals with the survivors of the trafficking and how they can get more of a fresh start and rather than have that record be held against them. So I think that was excellent that they worked together to do that. Our question is to urban and rural. I work in a urban setting and I live in a rural setting. And before I moved to Nebraska, I didn't know anything about rural. Nothing at all. 4-H, I think, helped me an awful lot, plus our neighbors to the south called the Odd Bodies. They were bound any term to turn me into a country girl. I think the biggest thing that has to happen is we have to work together. Now, Mark and I did see that when we worked together at school board as a Republican, as a Democrat, as a male, as a female, and we worked together for what was right for the children, what was right for the taxpayers, what was right for the educators, and we always kept that one piece in mind. What makes it right for the others? So without that, it makes it pretty hard and it's tough to pass legislation, which I think we saw in this last issue. So we have to come in and have clear steps of why this will help you. And it's just like teaching school. Oh, you want to learn this. Well, we have to tell them why they want to learn it and how it's going to help them. And so we need to break down those barriers because sometimes there are huge barriers. And we need to get them down. I don't think so much of, well, Mark, if you say this, then I'll say this. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think we just need to find what each can bring to the table rather than what each can take away. I think taking away sometimes gets us in a little bit of trouble. So if I bring and he brings, once it's at the table, then we see how to use it. So that's kind of how I deal with teenagers also.
Mass shootings and school safety are topics on everyone's minds these days. What should state lawmakers do to address these issues in today's society?
That is a great question, and something that I deal with on a daily basis. The school district that I'm in, we have lockdowns, we have fire drills, we have tornado drills, and it's not so much that it's a part of life. We're trying to figure out how to make it better. For instance, 2 weeks ago when we had a lockdown, which means there's an intruder in the building, and your doors are shut, and any doors on ends of hallways are automatically locked, one third grader said to me, "We need to do something about his light-up shoes." So you see the children, because the room is supposed to be dark, someone quick went and shut the blinds. Everybody else was shut. I teach computer science, shutting the computers. And when we got into the corner, the way that they decided to solve that was he was to take his shoes off and put in the filing cabinet. So they're thinking on how to do this through all of this. We are working with the police department in Lincoln, as Seward is working with the schools in Utica, in Milford, in Seward, with police officers coming and talking and scheduling things with. Schools can't do this by themselves. I am adamant about teachers not having guns at school. We already wear microphones. I don't know where would I put that. We hunt, so we have guns. But what about the teacher who's never been by a gun in their life? And a handgun versus the AK, whatever number they're putting with it, you know, they really don't go together, do they? So we're asking a teacher, and how do you know that it's a fellow teacher out in that hallway? Or because they would be dressed like the person coming in. I think that stands in law enforcement department. We just realized, as I said, about shutting those doors. We hadn't been doing that. that a button's hit, they're locked. So we're getting better at it, but we didn't know how to do that. We're pretty good at fire drills, because we even have those at church. People do those. So it's just tornado drills we don't do too bad at. And I was a product of hide under your desk because the bomb is coming. So, but we will get better at this.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. A lot of people have talked about how are we going to protect our children. I was fortunate to grow up in an era when we didn't have to worry about those types of things, but they exist today. And I think some of it is because of the decline of the family. On the other side, though, we have many programs that we're putting in place. Some of them are volunteer. Some of them are in partnership with various organizations. One that comes to mind is First 5 Nebraska. It's an organization that is funded by the Department of Education as well as private industry, where they're putting a lot of emphasis on getting kids into good programs early on. And we're talking now preschool. Sixpence is another program that's being supported throughout the educational systems. And then, of course, Head Start's been around for many years, but I know in Seward, the Kiwanis Club helps Head Start a lot. Early intervention is what we've got to do in education, because if we can help a young person early on in their career and get them started in the right direction, hopefully that'll keep them out of the court systems. Juvenile justice is now being handled by the courts, so probation is all handled through our local courts, and I know that there's a cost associated with that on a local basis, but the state also puts a lot of money into that. I was very supportive of a bill we had this past year. Senator Walls, one of my Democrat friends, was a teacher, and she brought a bill that would have put kids ESU would each have social workers installed in their, so it would give more feet on the ground to help deal with the problems that come forward. I voted to support that bill. It had, I think, 28 votes. It got passed the very last day of the legislature, and then the governor vetoed it. I was disappointed in his idea of vetoing that bill. I think the idea of there aren't enough police officers. One of the challenges we have there is recruiting people to work in jobs that don't pay real well and putting their neck on the line all the time. But I think that we could figure out a way where we'd have, and I know as Stephanie indicated, in Seward County, I know our sheriff department goes to Centennial and York and, or not York, but Milford and Seward, and even the private schools, and the state patrol, if they just stop in on occasion. They've got it pinpointed that most of these crimes occur early in the mornings or just before school gets out. If nothing else, if we had somebody there to show an interest or show that there was presence of police, I think that might help curb some of this. And then finally, the mental health issue is very important, and we need to continue to work on that. Thank you.
Many road projects have been put on hold throughout the state due to lack of funding. What can be done to remedy the situation, and how could the state generate money to finish stretches of expressway and other neglected areas throughout the state?
Thank you. That's a very good question. I was involved very seriously with Director Schneewise. He's a director of the Department of Roads when he was first hired. And I went out and met with him, and I talked to him about the importance of finishing up 81, taking 81 across my district north through Polk County, wrap it around and connect it so it goes into Columbus. And there was an organization called 4 Lanes for Nebraska. I believe that's a strong economic development tool that we need to put in place. I think we need to get it done. The very first year I was there, we had a bill that came before us that would have increased the gas tax. I supported that simply because I thought we needed more money to develop roads. And the governor vetoed that bill. We overrode the governor, and it's paying big dividends. And then the other thing that's happened since Director Schneewise has gotten here is he came from the Kansas arena. He's an engineer, and he understands how you can build a road and they don't have to all be 4 lanes. There's ways that we can do certain parts of it at a time and get more bang for our buck. I think it's important, though, that from an economic development perspective, that we continue to develop our roads. The governor, after he vetoed our bill, he took the money that was being developed and he used it for what's called an infrastructure bank so that we can develop the roads in a much quicker manner. And the other thing that's happened, we had a bill this past year, or I guess it was actually last year, brought by Senator Hilgers, that would give us some flexibility as we deal with the federal government and some of the challenges that come along with that and bypassing some of the regulations. And it passed through the legislature. The federal government's on board and it's working out very well. So we're working on that. It's an important part of our state economy. Roads are extremely important. So I think we're going in the right direction with our Department of Roads. The last thing I would tell you is we made it a Department of Transportation. So we moved aeronautics and the roads department together. It's now called the Department of Transportation. We could eliminate one department head by doing that, and we are building on economies of scale. So we're looking at ways to save money in that arena. Thank you.
I do want to thank all of you in session for voting for that mental health. We were all pretty excited about that and any way to help. Unfortunately, it got vetoed. On the roads, I think it also becomes an urban and rural issue. In fact, when people say to me, oh, why should I get involved in politics? They don't affect me. I say, do you drive your car on a road? And they'll say, well, yeah, I do. I said, okay, who's paying for that? So we have to think about that. We're a very mobile society. I think that the road department has a huge treasury, and we could use some more money out of that. I also think that grants from different places can be written for people to get them. I don't know about any of you, but if you're in Omaha or you're in Lincoln or you're in Grand Island, there's always something going on the roads. And wasn't everybody excited when the Lincoln to Omaha lanes got done so we could get up there and get back? Now, if you only make a railroad, that'd even be better, back and forth between. But I think there are a lot of different ways for us to look at that it doesn't necessarily just have to come out of the road department. So in education, when you want something and you've hit that limit, we write grants. So I don't see any reason why that couldn't help, why that couldn't be in place, and the grants would be out of back east, out of DC. And the unfortunate thing for us is we have a lot of roads that are rural, that aren't paved. But the ones that are paved, we want to keep them well. And you know our weather has a lot to do with it too, don't you think?
We have about 10 minutes left, so I think we'll start with Ms. Nankis for closing remarks. Each candidate will receive 5 minutes.
That's too much.
Or less.
No, that's too much. One thing that's nice to bring to the table is humor. I'm not sure which of my parents gave me that, or it was the grandparents, but I think a smile on somebody's face goes truly a long way, and I notice that with children. I notice that with anybody that I work with. If you've got this look, they're like, you know. Anyhow, I have enjoyed tonight, and I think it's so exciting that all of you came out, used those roads to get here, and you're taking out of your time to listen. I was not worried at all to talk with Senator Mark Colterman, or as I call Mark, because we've done this together for a while. We have no diss between us. It's much more of a cooperative thing. And so I would like to take the tremendous amount of education that I have, and what's the one thing you think about teachers? They make people come together and come to the table. I would like to take what I have learned and take that to the unicameral and have people honestly sit down and talk with each other and see where it is that we can have a meeting of the eye, so to speak. And I'm done. Is that 5 minutes?
Thank you. I too have appreciated this evening, and I knew this would be easy tonight because Stephanie and I have been friends for a long time. I think in closing, though, I'd like to talk a little bit about why I decided to run again for the legislature. When I ran the first time, and throughout my whole business career, I based that on commitment. There's three things that I committed to when I decided to run. First of all, God has always been number one. My family, I'm committed to family, and I'm committed to the state of Nebraska. I want to continue to watch the state of Nebraska grow, and I want to be able to deal with some of the challenges that we face. I've been blessed to serve the last 4 years. I would tell you that the last 2 years have probably been the most difficult times of my life since my wife had terminal cancer. And when she was diagnosed with that, because of our long-term relationship of 46 years, I said, you know, I'll resign. I'll spend the last few days that you have together. And her exact words to me were, you're going to need the legislature as much as the legislature needs you. I don't want you to resign. So we worked that out. I would tell you that we are a nonpartisan body. When you look at if you have a chance to look at your ballots, you won't see a D, an R, an I, or an L. None of those people are listed. Your political affiliation shouldn't come to the legislature, in my opinion. We have all the Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and Libertarians. We need to remain nonpartisan. I've been blessed to receive quite a few awards since I've been there. The Cancer Society gave me Legislator of the Year in 2017. The Hospital Association gave me Associate of the Year in 2017. The Dental Hygienist was in 2016, and a program called Project Extra Mile gave me the Levon Crosby Public Policy Award in 2017. I've been fortunate to pass a lot of legislation at the unicameral, and I believe my greatest ability and my greatest asset is building consensus and my commitment. This past year I prioritized a bill. Each senator gets to prioritize one bill. I prioritized Anna Wishart's bill. I think it was 439 if I recall. I'm not good with the numbers, but I think it was 439. Anna is a young Democrat that came in 2 years ago. I felt it was really good legislation because it allowed people that are working, nurses that are working in nursing homes as well as assisted living, to work up to the maximum ability in their license. They couldn't do that before. We had nurses that couldn't help people that were working in assisted living. The other side of that was I thought that by keeping people in assisted living longer, we'd be able to save the state some money. Because 53% of the population today that live in nursing homes are being funded by Medicaid. That's a high percentage of the state. That's a really fast-growing area. So we were able to pass that legislation. The governor signed it. We had a bill signing a week ago. In closing, I guess I'd humbly like to ask for your support for the next 4 years. I want to explain what commitment means to me. From the time my wife was diagnosed and died, I missed 1/2 day in the legislature. When I decided to file for re-election back in February, my wife encouraged me to do so prior to that, and she said, you need to do that. I pledged you that same commitment for the next 4 years. Once again, I'd like to thank you for coming tonight. I appreciate both the York News Times and the Seward Independent for putting this together. I'd like to thank Stephanie for a good conversation, and God bless you. God bless our state. Thank you.